A dead grandfather, a private island, a mother whose death was buried beneath 16 years of lies. When Annie Jacobson travels to Muskoka expecting answers about an inheritance, she finds a locked cottage, a girl wearing her mother's face, and proof that the adults in her life rewrote the past. Then a forgotten cassette, a genetic clue hidden in an ordinary family habit, and one final choice turn the mystery inside out. By the last morning, one girl wakes in a New York bedroom she has never called home, while the other remains beside the lake. Sterling Point is the story of how they got there and why that exchange is the first honest decision this family has made in years. Annie lives in New York with her fraternal twin brother, Connor, and their widowed father, Stephen. Connor moves through life as if every problem can be turned into a joke, while Annie treats every decision like it belongs in a college application. She is waiting to hear from an elite Wharton summer program that she sees as a direct path to her dream school. When the rejection finally arrives, Annie is devastated. To everyone else, it is only a summer program. To her, it feels like proof that the future she built her entire identity around may not happen. Her boyfriend, Oliver, offers little comfort. Annie has long suspected that Oliver is gay, but she has avoided confronting it because their relationship is familiar and safe. When she suggests joining him on his summer trip, he awkwardly admits he had hoped they would spend the summer apart. Before Annie can process what that means, Connor arrives with even stranger news. Their maternal grandfather, Gordon Campbell, has died. Annie and Connor barely knew Gordon. After their mother, Goldie, died when they were toddlers, Stephen cut off nearly every connection to her family. He always described Gordon as cruel and difficult, so the twins expect nothing from the estate. Instead, Gordon leaves them a trust and a valuable property called Sterling Point, located on an island in Muskoka, Canada. Stephen receives nothing. Gordon also leaves separate letters for the twins, but Stephen immediately takes control of them and refuses to explain why. Annie's suspicion grows when she discovers that Gordon had been writing to them for years. Stephen hid every letter in a safe. In Gordon's final message, he apologizes for staying away, says Sterling Point will reveal the truth, and urges Annie to find a mysterious girl who will need her after he is gone. The rejection from Wharton has accidentally given Annie the one thing she never allows herself to have, an empty summer. Without telling Stephen the truth, she flies to Canada while Connor covers for her. Gordon's letter sounds like a map, but it is really a warning. Finding the girl will force Annie to question Stephen's version of Goldie and her own place in the family. The trip immediately pushes Annie outside her controlled New York life. She takes a short flight to Toronto, then discovers the final leg requires a small seaplane. Her young pilot Ellis is calm, teasing, and completely at home above the lakes. Annie is terrified, but when the plane lands on the water, Sterling Point appears beneath her like another world. The island is isolated, beautiful, and almost completely disconnected from cell service. Gordon's old green cottage is filled with photographs, furniture, and traces of Goldie's youth. Annie begins searching before she even understands what she is looking for. She studies old pictures of her mother, walks through the woods, and tries to imagine Goldie as a teenager rather than the tragic figure Stephen refuses to discuss. To get food and transportation, Annie reaches the local marina, where she meets the people whose lives are tied to the island. Joe Anderson runs the marina. His son Ellis is the pilot who brought her in. Una, a magnetic young woman with a British accent, offers Annie a chaotic first boating lesson, while Una's younger sister Maple watches the adults around her with more awareness than they realize. Through Una and the local group, Annie learns that Gordon was not the monster Stephen described. People on the island loved him. He protected Sterling Point from developers, even though selling it could have made him millions. His death leaves everyone afraid the island will be demolished for another luxury resort. Annie thinks the question is whether Gordon was good or cruel. She has not realized the real danger is the person who believes Sterling Point is already hers. At a party across the lake, Annie unexpectedly runs into Rory, an old friend from New York. Rory remembers her as the intimidating child prodigy who always seemed destined for greatness. His family owns an enormous property nearby, and his mother Denise has known Annie's parents for years. Denise is delighted to see Annie, but her careless memories expose the first major crack in Stephen's story. Goldie had been deeply unhappy in New York. She brought Annie and Connor to Muskoka and began filing for divorce from Stephen. Annie had never been told that her mother wanted to leave him. When Annie returns to Gordon's cottage that night, she finds another girl inside. The stranger is furious and demands to know why Annie has broken into her grandfather's home. Her name is Ramona Campbell. She looks so much like the young Goldie in the photographs that Annie immediately understands Gordon's final instruction. Ramona is Goldie's biological daughter. Ramona has just returned after spending the final part of Gordon's life caring for him. Gordon raised her, and Sterling Point is the only home that has ever felt permanent. She has no interest in Annie's questions, and even less interest in accepting her as family. Still, she allows Annie to sleep on the couch for one night after learning that Annie's mother is also dead. The two girls share grief, but they understand it in opposite ways. Annie remembers almost nothing about Goldie and has spent years pretending the loss did not define her. Ramona grew up surrounded by Goldie's belongings and Gordon's stories, yet she carries the pain of never having known her mother at all. By morning, Ramona orders Annie out. Annie leaves with Goldie's photograph and tries to navigate the island alone, only to strand herself on the lake. Ellis rescues her, and their easy connection begins to deepen. While Annie struggles with the boat, Ramona reconnects with the friends she abandoned while caring for Gordon. Una is overjoyed to have her back, but Ramona keeps her emotions guarded. Una has always been the person Ramona wants most and trusts least, because Una avoids commitment and has a history of leaving before anyone can leave her. Annie continues investigating Goldie's past. Denise confirms that Goldie brought the twins to Muskoka and intended to end her marriage. Annie suffers a panic attack as the reality of her childhood begins to shift, and Rory helps her breathe through it. He understands the ambitious, polished version of Annie because he comes from the same world. Ellis, by contrast, represents the life she has never allowed herself to imagine: quiet, practical, and connected to a place rather than a plan. Ramona soon discovers that Annie took Goldie's photograph. Furious, she confronts her in front of everyone. Annie finally reveals the truth. Goldie adopted Annie and Connor as newborns, but Ramona is the biological daughter Goldie kept hidden. Gordon's letter told Annie to find her. Neither girl knew the other existed, and the adults around them separated their lives completely. Ramona refuses to accept the word sister. Annie is adopted, so they do not share blood. To Ramona, that distinction protects the only identity she has left. Goldie was her mother, Gordon was her father, and Sterling Point belongs to the life they built together. Annie's arrival feels like an invasion by someone who already had a family and now wants a piece of hers. But after reading Gordon's final letter, Ramona realizes Annie is not lying. Gordon admits that the separation was wrong and hoped the girls would eventually find each other. Instead of leaving, Annie stays. She moves back into the cottage and tries to earn Ramona's trust through persistence, even when Ramona clearly wants space. Their first attempts at living together are awkward, but small moments begin breaking through the hostility. Annie learns that Ramona is gay and quietly in love with Una. Ramona learns that Annie has spent years dating a boy she knows cannot truly want her. They argue, mock each other, share a room, and begin speaking about Goldie in ways neither could manage alone. Annie envies Ramona's physical resemblance to their mother, while Ramona envies the years Annie had inside Goldie's chosen family. Neither is ready to call the other a sister, but both are already behaving like one. While helping clear Gordon's belongings, Annie finds a box of Goldie's old possessions, including a cassette mixtape. Ramona wants everything removed because each object reminds her that Gordon is gone. Annie cannot throw away the few pieces of her mother she has ever touched, so she hides them at the marina. The box seems like a collection of old memories, but one cassette has a second side, and what Goldie recorded there will eventually blow open the question of Ramona's father. The first side changes the story. Goldie recorded the tape as a teenager for Joe. Her voice is playful, intimate, and unmistakably in love. Annie confronts Joe, who admits that he and Goldie dated when they were young. He claims they lost touch after she moved to New York, married Stephen, and built a different life. His discomfort makes it clear there is more he is not saying. Annie leaves believing she has found an old romance. What she does not know is that the tape is not finished. Annie decides to do something kind for Ramona and organizes a small gathering at the cottage. Her idea of a quiet evening quickly expands once Connor's friends, Rory, Ellis, Una, and half the local social circle become involved. The party brings every unresolved attraction into the same room. Rory and Annie reconnect over their shared past. He remembers the child piano prodigy she used to be and the way she seemed fearless even when she was terrified. Ellis has quietly repaired an old dog-shaped lamp for Annie, turning one of Goldie's discarded objects into a personal gift. Ramona, meanwhile, is unable to understand what Una wants from her. Una touches her with an intimacy that feels like a confession, then arrives with a camp counselor named Stacy Mallory and acts as if nothing happened. Ramona's jealousy is obvious, but she has never told Una how she feels. Both girls are trapped by the same fear. Ramona expects abandonment, while Una avoids promising anything she may not be able to keep. The night ends with two kisses moving the story in different directions. Annie kisses Rory, drawn toward someone who already understands her New York identity. Ramona and Una come close to admitting what has always existed between them, but Una retreats before either can define it. Then Connor arrives at Sterling Point and turns the emotional reunion into a business meeting. He estimates the island is worth more than $20 million. Gordon divided ownership among Ramona, Annie, and Connor, and once the twins turn 18, 2 votes could force a sale. Connor imagines luxury development and an immediate fortune. Ramona is horrified, while Annie promises to protect the island. Connor appears to be the financial threat, but every argument about ownership keeps leading back to the night Goldie died. To stop Connor from pushing, Annie proposes a deal. He must stay for 1 week and experience Sterling Point before deciding. If he still hates it, they will have a serious conversation about selling. Annie and Ramona privately assume he will fall in love with someone, the lake, or both. Connor treats the island like a strange foreign country, complains about the lack of service, and calculates the value of every view. Yet his resistance begins to soften as he joins cliff jumping, parties, outdoor movies, and local traditions. Beneath the jokes, Connor is more sensitive than he allows anyone to see. He understands Annie's need to remain the accomplished twin, and he has quietly built much of his personality around never competing with her too directly. During a trip to the cliffs, Annie confronts the grief she has avoided her entire life. She always believed she was not deeply affected by Goldie's death because she was too young to remember her. At Sterling Point, every photograph and story forces her to imagine the childhood she might have had if Goldie had lived. Annie wonders whether losing her mother is the hidden reason she needs control, achievement, and constant proof that she is enough. Rory knows the darker side of Annie's perfectionism. As a child, she was an exceptional classical pianist, but when a younger prodigy threatened to surpass her, Annie deliberately had her own hand slammed in a car door. She would rather destroy her talent than experience being second best. For years, she told people the injury was an accident. Muskoka is the first place where she begins admitting how much fear has shaped her choices. Ellis asks Annie to an outdoor movie night, and she accepts, but her feelings remain divided. Rory offers familiarity, status, and the future she thought she wanted. Ellis offers patience and the freedom to be uncertain. Annie does not yet know which version of herself is real. Ramona also misreads an invitation. Una asks her to the movie night, and Ramona assumes it is a date. Then Una arrives with Stacy. Hurt and humiliated, Ramona gets drunk with Connor. She lashes out at Stacy, accuses Una of playing with her, and exposes the feelings she has tried to hide. Una insists she did not understand the night as a date, but Ramona believes the touch and intimacy at the party meant something. Their argument ends without resolution. While helping carry the intoxicated twins home, Joe finally tells Annie the truth everyone has avoided. Stephen always said Goldie died of cancer. Joe says Goldie actually died while giving birth to Ramona. That revelation is devastating, but it is still incomplete. The question is no longer only how Goldie died. It is who she believed would raise the child she delivered. Annie does not know whether to tell Ramona. Connor argues that some truths only create pain, but Annie has already learned what secrecy does to a family. When Ramona senses that Annie is hiding something, Annie tells her. Ramona is crushed by the idea that her birth caused Goldie's death, even though Annie insists she was only a baby and carries no blame. For Ramona, the revelation does something facts usually cannot. It turns her own birth into the scene of a tragedy. She has spent her life mourning a mother she never met. Now she fears that her first breath was the reason Goldie took her last. Then Annie turns the cassette over. On the second side, Goldie speaks to Joe while pregnant. She describes the baby kicking and imagines the three of them becoming a family. At the same time, Ellis finds paperwork showing that Gordon appointed Joe as Ramona's guardian. The evidence seems undeniable. Joe was Goldie's lover, he was present when Ramona was born, and Gordon trusted him with her future. Annie and Ellis conclude that Joe must be Ramona's biological father. For one brief moment, the mystery appears solved, and Ramona seems to have found the missing parent she has imagined all her life. But the tape proves only what Goldie planned, not what biology decided. Every adult in this story has confused a convincing explanation with proof, and that difference will matter later. Annie promises Ramona there will be no more secrets, but she does not immediately reveal the suspicion about Joe. It is the first major promise between the sisters, and Annie breaks it almost as soon as she makes it. When that decision finally surfaces, Ramona will not only hear a new fact, she will see Annie behaving like the adults who controlled the truth before her. The twins' 18th birthday arrives. Connor transforms the celebration into an elaborate tribute to his favorite childhood pop culture, while Annie would rather ignore the day. Birthdays remind her of aging, death, and the feeling that she never learned how to be a child. Ellis gives Annie a thoughtful handmade gift, but Rory takes her out with friends from New York. At the club, Annie is reminded of the Wharton program she did not get into and the ambitious life waiting for her outside Muskoka. Drunk, emotional, and desperate to stop thinking, Annie sleeps with Rory. It is her first time. She wanted it in the moment, but the next morning she panics, afraid that acting without a plan means she is becoming someone she cannot control. Ramona surprises her with compassion. She tells Annie that being messy does not make her broken, and that living in the moment is not a failure. Connor is hiding his own version of the same fear. He reveals that he was accepted into an elite coding program in California, but chose not to attend and never told Annie or Steven. Connor is genuinely gifted, but being openly ambitious would disrupt the role the twins have assigned each other. Annie is the driven genius. Connor is the unserious one who keeps everyone laughing. His decision shows that both twins have sacrificed parts of themselves to preserve a family system built after Goldie's death. That same night, Ramona and Una finally stop running from each other. Ramona apologizes for her jealousy and admits she would rather risk changing their friendship than continue pretending. Una confesses that Ramona is the most important person in her life, but she is terrified that a failed relationship would cost her the one person she cannot lose. They kiss and choose to try. Steven arrives at Sterling Point just in time to see Annie leaving Rory's place and Ellis watching from a distance. His presence restores the old pattern. Annie feels judged, Connor jokes, and Steven tries to regain control before understanding what happened. At dinner, Annie forces him to explain the past, but Steven's version is not neutral. It is the story of a grieving man who has spent 16 years turning his choices into evidence that everyone else failed him. Steven and Goldie tried for years to have a biological child. After failed fertility treatments, their marriage began to collapse. They separated briefly, then received the chance to adopt Annie and Connor. The twins were everything they had wanted, so Steven and Goldie attempted to repair the marriage. But Goldie no longer wanted their New York life or her career in finance. She wanted to raise the children at Sterling Point. Steven refused. Goldie took the twins to Muskoka and filed for divorce. When she revealed that she was pregnant, Steven believed the baby belonged to Joe. He arrived with a lawyer and took Annie and Connor back to New York. Steven insists he was returning the children to the home they had agreed to build. Annie hears something else. He removed them from a mother who was trying to change her life. Steven describes Goldie as unstable and says the island distracted her from reality. Annie recognizes the contempt beneath his grief. She accuses him of treating every choice Goldie made outside his plan as proof that she had lost her mind. Steven responds by warning Annie away from Ellis, convinced that she is repeating her mother's mistakes. At a camp talent show, the younger characters expose what the adults keep failing to provide. Maple gets her first period while away from home. Una, Ramona, and Annie turn it into a celebration, offering the support Annie never received when she was the same age. Watching Maple makes Annie realize how often she raised herself. She scheduled her own appointments, solved her own problems, and became responsible so Steven could remain buried in grief. Her childhood did not disappear by accident. She surrendered it to keep the family functioning. Ellis becomes the person with whom Annie can finally admit that pain. He does not try to fix her or demand that she be grateful. He stays near her when she hides in a closet, the place she used to retreat when she felt overwhelmed. Their slow connection becomes a kiss, quiet and vulnerable in a way her night with Rory was not. Outside the emotional chaos, Ellis carries a secret of his own. The marina is struggling, and Joe refuses to raise prices or admit how close the business is to failure. Ellis has been quietly overcharging wealthy customers and saving the extra cash to repair the roof, replace unsafe boats, and create a financial cushion. When Joe discovers the money, father and son explode at each other. Ellis accuses Joe of being so committed to denial that everyone around him must solve the problems he refuses to face. The same accusation applies to the family's larger secret. Stephen confronts Joe at the marina, and their argument turns physical. Joe accuses Stephen of taking Goldie's children in the middle of the night. Stephen blames Joe and Sterling Point for destroying his marriage. Joe says Goldie no longer loved Stephen and was finally choosing the life she wanted. Joe's wife, Kate, finds the cassette and learns that Joe's relationship with Goldie did not end in high school. Joe admits he believed Ramona was his daughter. Before he can decide how to tell her, Denise announces it publicly. She intends to force honesty, but instead, Ramona learns that the adults discussed her identity before allowing her to know it herself. Ramona looks around and realizes Annie, Ellis, Joe, Stephen, and others knew or suspected the truth before she did. Annie had promised there would be no more secrets. Feeling betrayed by every person she trusted, Ramona runs. The group searches the lake and island, but Una realizes Ramona has taken Gordon's car and returned to Barry. Una finds her there. Ramona expects anger, but Una refuses to let her disappear without speaking. She tells Ramona that she can withdraw, go silent, and take space from anyone else, but not from her. Una loves her. Ramona finally says she loves Una too. Back at the marina, Ellis forces Joe to confront both his financial failures and his personal cowardice. Joe admits he is Ramona's father as far as he understands it, but he never found the courage to claim her. Gordon had just lost Goldie, and Joe believed Gordon could give the baby a stable life. What began as a temporary decision hardened into years of silence. When Ramona returns, she asks Joe to sign away his guardianship. Joe explains the plan he once made with Goldie. Goldie would leave Stephen, Joe would leave Kate, and together they would raise Annie, Connor, Ramona, and Ellis at Sterling Point. Goldie's death destroyed that future before it began. Stephen wanted the twins in New York. Gordon wanted to protect Ramona from the burden of the affair and her mother's death. The men convinced themselves that separating the children was the least damaging option. Joe says he regretted it every day. Gordon regretted it too, and repeatedly tried to reconnect the siblings. Ramona is not ready to forgive either of them. Gordon was the father who raised her, and Joe cannot appear after 16 years and expect biology to create a relationship. A final letter from Gordon gives Ramona something the adults cannot. He tells her how proud he is, admits that keeping the family apart was wrong, and reminds her she is not alone. He hoped Annie, Connor, and Ramona would find one another and recover some of the years they lost. For the first time, Ramona openly calls Annie her sister. But one basic question remains. Joe believes he is her father, and belief is not proof. As summer nears its end, Annie imagines staying at Sterling Point. Rory offers an influential Wharton connection, the kind of opportunity she once would have treated as destiny. This time, she hesitates. She wants time with Goldie's home, time with Ellis, and time to discover whether the person she has become on the island is more honest than the one she built in New York. Ellis never asks her to stay for him, but their goodbye already hurts like something neither wants to end. Ramona then notices a small detail everyone else treats as meaningless. Annie explains that she organizes Stephen's socks because he is colorblind and sometimes mixes up dark colors. Ramona freezes because she is colorblind too. She looks into the genetics and discovers why that coincidence matters. The common red-green form of colorblindness is usually X-linked, and a father passes his only X chromosome to every daughter. A colorblind father such as Stephen therefore fits the inheritance pattern Ramona is seeing in herself. The clue cannot identify her father on its own, and it does not eliminate Joe without knowing his color vision, but it makes Stephen genetically plausible in a way no one had considered. Ramona asks him to take a DNA test, forcing the family to wait for a result that could rearrange every relationship around them. The result does exactly that. Stephen is Ramona's biological father. Joe is not. After years of failed fertility treatments, Goldie and Stephen believed they could not have a biological child. During their separation, Goldie reconnected with Joe and planned a future with him, so everyone assumed the pregnancy was his. In reality, one of the treatments had worked. Ramona is the biological daughter Stephen and Goldie thought they would never have. The twist does not make Joe's love for Goldie unreal, and it does not erase Gordon as the man who raised Ramona. But it destroys the story each adult used to justify keeping the children apart. For Stephen, the discovery creates a daughter he never knew existed. For Annie, it activates the insecurity underneath almost every achievement of her life. She is adopted. Ramona is the biological miracle child. Stephen immediately grieves the 16 years he missed, and Annie hears that grief as confirmation that Ramona is the daughter her parents truly wanted while she was the replacement they learned to love. Stephen insists nothing between them has changed, but Annie refuses the easy reassurance. Something has changed, and asking her to pretend otherwise is another way of making her manage his emotions. Annie finally tells Stephen what she has never been allowed to say. She is the child. She has spent years anticipating his sadness, protecting Connor, and treating every success as proof that the family survived Goldie's death. She cannot repair this revelation for him. Stephen apologizes, but dismisses her possible life at Sterling Point as a summer fantasy and warns that following Goldie's path will not bring her mother back. Annie answers with the question he has avoided for 16 years. When will he forgive Goldie for dying? His anger toward Gordon, Joe, the island, and Ramona has always been grief looking for someone to punish. The paternity result also breaks open Ramona's relationship with Una. Ramona wonders what it might be like to visit New York, know Stephen, travel, or experience life beyond Muskoka. Una hears only the possibility of being left. Her mother is in India on a spiritual journey, while Una stays home caring for Maple, so abandonment organizes her life. Una assumes New York will be brighter and more exciting than anything Ramona has with her. Ramona insists she has never left, but Una is already protecting herself from a future that has not happened. Their argument turns cruel, and Una ends the relationship before Ramona can leave her first. Annie and Ellis face a different version of the same fear. He knows she may return to New York, and neither of them wants to pretend distance will be easy. They promise to write, talk, and visit, but Annie admits she does not want to leave. Ellis does not offer a magical solution. He simply allows the goodbye to hurt. That restraint matters, because unlike Stephen, Rory, or even Annie herself, Ellis never tries to decide her future for her. He gives her room to choose it. Heartbroken, furious, and convinced she has nothing left at Sterling Point, Ramona decides to sell the island. Gordon is dead. Joe is no longer the father she was told to imagine. Una is gone. Annie is reacting painfully to the DNA result. Connor and Denise already have a lucrative offer waiting. Ramona begins to question whether she truly loves Sterling Point, or whether Gordon taught her to confuse loyalty with identity. Selling would give her money, education, travel, and the chance to discover who she is somewhere that does not contain every person who has hurt her. Connor, unexpectedly sympathetic, tells her the decision is hers, and reminds Annie that she promised to support it. Annie initially keeps her promise to support Ramona. Then a fragile memory returns, Goldie scratching her back while they lie together, making Annie feel warm, safe, and held. She cannot prove every detail is real, but the feeling is. Sterling Point is the only place where Goldie exists as more than a photograph or Stephen's grief. Annie asks Ramona to delay the sale for 1 year. Ramona hears control disguised as concern. Annie has already had New York, money, school, and choice. By saying Ramona is only 16 and may regret selling, Annie repeats the adult's oldest mistake, deciding that love gives her the right to overrule someone else's life. The sisters separate in anger. Ramona tries to reach Una before leaving, but Una hides inside the trailer and lets Maple say she is not there. Ramona leaves a message that she is trapped at Sterling Point and will talk whenever Una is ready, but Una remains silent. Their breakup is therefore the final state of the season, not a temporary misunderstanding repaired before the credits. At the same time, Connor receives a call from the adoption agency. His biological mother has answered his request and wants contact. He tells no one, opening a new family secret at the exact moment the others are trying to end the old ones. Before leaving, Annie asks Joe for the final missing piece of Goldie's story. Goldie had a ticket back to New York 2 days after Stephen took Annie and Connor. She was not abandoning them. She intended to fight for them. Before she could leave, she went into early labor. The stress of losing the twins did not cause her death. Goldie had an undiagnosed heart condition. Joe raced her across the lake, bending the boat's throttle as he pushed it toward the hospital. Doctors performed an emergency C-section. As they took Goldie into surgery, she looked at Joe and smiled as if she were reassuring him. Ramona was delivered safely, but Goldie never woke up, and she never got to hold her daughter. That truth releases the children from guilt the adults allowed them to carry. Ramona did not kill Goldie by being born. Stephen did not kill her by taking the twins. Joe could not have saved her by driving the boat faster. And Goldie was not choosing one set of children over another. Her plans were messy, painful, and unfair to several people, but she was trying to return for Annie and Connor while building a future that included the baby she was carrying. The tragedy is not that Goldie stopped loving her children, it is that she died before any of them could know the full shape of that love. Annie then proposes an exchange that respects what each sister needs. Ramona has spent her life as the girl with the dead mother, surrounded by Goldie's cottage, bed, stories, and belongings. Annie needs some of that history. Ramona, however, has never had the chance to be the girl with a living father. Annie has had Stephen for 18 years. Imperfectly, but genuinely, and believes Ramona deserves the chance to know him, be cared for, and decide whether biology can become a relationship. Ramona is unsure she wants that life. Annie says she still deserves the choice. When Ramona challenges her certainty, Annie gives the answer that matters. She knows because she is her sister. The finale does not leave the decision as a metaphor. Annie and Ramona actually exchange lives. Stephen and Connor leave Muskoka with Ramona, who goes to New York to live inside the family history she was denied. Annie remains at Sterling Point, choosing the cottage, Goldie's memories, the lake, and the community she found there. The closing montage completes the visual mirror established in the premiere. Ramona wakes in Annie's Brooklyn bedroom, framed by the city outside the window. Annie wakes in Ramona's room at Sterling Point, surrounded by the cottage and the lake. Both bedrooms remain the same, but the girls inside them have changed. One sister begins a life with the living father she never knew. The other begins a life inside the history of the mother she can barely remember. That is the real meaning of the ending. The sisters are not trading identities because one life is objectively better. They are borrowing the missing half of their own histories. Annie has lived with a father but almost no mother, so she stays where Goldie's presence is strongest. Ramona has lived with a mother's memory, but no living parent, so she goes where Stephen can become more than a name on a DNA result. For the first time, the adults do not divide the children or hide information from them. Annie and Ramona choose the arrangement themselves, knowing it may be temporary and knowing either girl can change her mind. The swap also corrects the romantic ending. Annie is not separated from Ellis by a permanent return to New York. She stays in Muskoka, where Ellis remains part of the life she has chosen. The finale does not promise that love will solve Annie's anxiety or that the relationship will be effortless, but it gives them time that neither expected to have. Ramona and Una receive no equivalent comfort. Una hears Ramona's attempt to reconnect and still cannot face her. Their love remains real, but so does the damage. Any future relationship will require Una to stop treating abandonment as inevitable, and Ramona to decide whether Sterling Point is a home she returns to or a life she has outgrown. Several questions remain open. The final montage suggests the immediate sale of Sterling Point is off the table, but its legal and financial future is unresolved. Connor still owns a share, and the marina remains vulnerable. Joe has lost the biological claim he relied on, while his marriage to Kate and relationship with Ellis still carry the damage of his secrecy. Stephen must parent Ramona without turning her into a replacement for Goldie or asking Annie to manage his guilt. Connor must decide whether to meet his biological mother and whether to tell Annie first. Annie must discover whether staying is a genuine future or another plan built to protect her from uncertainty. At the time of this recap, Prime Video has not officially renewed Sterling Point for a second season, but the finale leaves clear room for one. Ramona navigating New York and a father she barely knows. Annie building a life with Ellis while protecting an island she does not fully understand. Una deciding whether fear is worth losing Ramona, and Connor opening a new branch of the family story. The season begins with adults deciding which children belong where. It ends with the children taking that power back. Sterling Point preserved the family's secrets for 16 years, but the final image shows that truth is only the beginning. What matters is what Annie, Ramona, and Connor choose once no one else is choosing for them.